So what is being done now in Iraq is much worse than any stage we have seen in Iraq. And what I wanted to concentrate on is that the Shiites are also, they are suffering as much as the Sunnis are suffering.
So now we'll discuss one of the most controversial issues in Iraq, the death squads. Who's responsible for the death squads? Says that he knows as a fact that people who started creating death squads are Israelis and some people from the Kurdish area and some of the Chalabi supporters and troops. And he says there is an American party that is involved in these death squads, and he knows exactly who's he talking about when it comes to the American side of the situation. When the US administration planned for this war, they wanted Iraqis to reach to a point where they would say, please stay in our country, occupy us, because now we will fight among ourselves. The Arab Sunnis in Iraq were the ones who were the most against the occupation, and they were requesting an immediate withdrawal by the occupation troops. But because of the continuous attacks by the US on this particular part of the Iraqi population, and destruction of their cities, and they left them very vulnerable with no homes and with no military weapons or anything to defend themselves. And now the US is looking forward to see this part of the population asking the US to stay there to help them and protect them from the death squads that are going around streets, shooting them and killing them and destroying their homes. So these death squads were created so that everyone will believe in the American project for the new Middle East as the only solution for the situation. Iraqi nationalists and other, especially many of the Iraqi Sunnis, have fought very hard against the project of federalism inside Iraq. So they wanted to create these death squads so that they will threaten the Arab Sunnis very much and kill many of them, so that Arab Sunnis will start requesting and demanding a federalism for their own to protect themselves as well. Or maybe even they will start requesting a separation from Iraq as a state, not just a federalism inside Iraq. We had a meeting during the time of writing the constitution, and it included 800
Shiites and
800 community and religious leaders from the southern part of Iraq. So we asked these people who represent the tribes and religious leaders from the south, which is majority Shia. We asked them, we are going to discuss the constitution now, and we want to see your opinion when it comes to federalism. Are you for federalism or are you against it? They said 85% of them were totally opposing the federalism. And we had a similar conference for non-governmental organizations in the South. We invited, all of the NGOs in the South were invited to this conference. And then they had secret voting, confidential voting, and the results showed that 95% of all of the southern NGOs are opposing federalism in the south of Iraq. So you can see that both the civil society leaders and the NGOs are overwhelmingly opposing the idea of having federalism in the south. But despite these facts on the ground, some people in the government wrote this part of federalism in the south in the constitution, and they managed to pass it by intimidation and threatening all of the key holders in the Iraqi government and Iraqi people.
Federalism is a start of a civil war in Iraq, because now they will make federal regions, and after that they will ask for separation, and then they will have fight on the borders. Where is the border of this province and where is the border of the other province? Everyone would like to extend on the other provinces because of the natural resources distribution in Iraq. And because of the water is in one hand and oil in the other hand. The already discovered oil now is in the southern part of Iraq. And the oil, which is not discovered, and also the gas, is on the western part of Iraq and the Sunni areas. So you see how much conflict our possibility of conflict we have now in Iraq. Therefore, the only way for Iraq is to stay united.
The biggest battles that all of us have to fight together is a battle against this new Middle East project or new Middle East map that is being promoted by some sides in the US government. This project is a very evil project. It's based on destroying countries and separating communities from each other and making smaller states in the Middle East. And it's based on a so-called fact that they're creating all of these things under the name of democracy to separate people from each other and create these smaller states all around the Middle East. Iraq knows that this new democracy in Iraq is just a lie. The Iraqis want democracy, but they don't want this imported democracy that the American government brought. Because this democracy that the Bush administration imposed on Iraq is not a real democracy. It's a total lie, and the Iraqis reject. But Iraqis are looking forward to have their real democracy, their own democracy. What Israel is doing in Lebanon is exactly what the US is doing in Iraq too. Israel is not really just working to guarantee a small border, safe zone in their borders. They are trying to provoke a civil war inside Lebanon. And the Lebanese community is very vulnerable for such a war. Maybe even more vulnerable than Iraqis themselves because of the historical differences between the sects there. So what Israelis are doing in Lebanon, supported by the US administration, is a part of what's happening in Iraq. Until now, Israel didn't really attack centers of Hezbollah or didn't attack centers of weapons of Hezbollah. What they were attacking is civilian centers that actually affect civilians in Lebanon, and they want to create this outrage by different Lebanese sects against Hezbollah because Hezbollah initiated what was happening. So the ultimate goal is to start this civilian unrest and conflict between Lebanese themselves, and like to push the country into more conflict. And maybe this reminds us of what's happening in Iraq. What is happening now is that there is a global outrage and hatred against Americans because of what's happening, because of their administration's policies in the world. So we should all work together to enhance the American people's image in front of the world instead of letting it deteriorate even worse. And by enhancing the US people's image and stopping further wars, we can even protect America and guarantee that there will not be future attacks on the US and future conflicts between the US and the world when the US people actually reach to a point where they have to meet these populations who were oppressed under their name. The real problem is between Iraqis on the one hand and the US administration and Iraqis who came with the Bush administration to Iraq on the other hand. This is the real reconciliation that should start happening. When all of these parties entered Iraq after the war, they didn't have 5% of support for them from the Iraqi population. So all of these lies about Iraqis being given the authority and like the sovereign Iraq being a sovereign state are mere lies, and no one should believe them. They are just some naive theories that are being thrown around by the Bush administration. The U.S. administration put them in the governing council, and then they put them in the transitional government, and they gave them an absolute freedom in looting all of Iraq's money and wealth. And they used that money to build their parties and to create their militias. Now we are being put in a very complicated situation because militias are as bad as the occupation. So we want to get rid of both. We want to get rid of militias and we want to get rid of the occupation too.
We are here as part of a group that says we want our troops to come home. And can you help us in how we talk to people in the United States about this, given the situation that has been created by the United States?
I believe that the reason behind the insecurity in Iraq and the no stability situation in Iraq is the presence of the U.S. troops in Iraq. We want the U.S. troops to pull out. This is what we should all be working towards. We want the U.S. troops to pull out from Iraq, and we want them to correct all of their mistakes before they pull out from Iraq. The mistakes that were committed by the U.S. administration in Iraq are huge. They are enormous in Iraq. So we have to push to have a timetable for withdrawing the U.S. troops. This timetable have to be accompanied with a parallel timetable for fixing mistakes that were committed in Iraq by the occupation troops and dealing with the consequences of these mistakes.